Thank you for joining us here in Dallas. This is the first of our quarterfinal matches. It's between two-time invitational competitor Kevin Jones and David Pierce here on Living End. For Kevin, he joins 3 of his teammates in the top 8. Their 5-man team placed 4 of them into the top 8, one of the most dominant performances we've had this year. Kevin looking to help them close out 3 of those 4 semifinal slots.
Yeah, in great position to do it. He's the higher seed in his quarterfinals matchups here. Has the turn 1 Delver. I believe there's a Mana Leak in his hand as well. Missing piece, potentially a second land, though. If he has that, I think he's in great position.
All right, Dark Slick Shores into Delver was the start. He'll now cast Serum Vision. So if Delver wouldn't flip the first turn, it certainly can do it on the second with this Scry. Or maybe not. He draws a spell and has 2 lands here. And here's already a decision for Kevin. He is land light, only has 1 more land in his hand. If he wants a third one, he has to put one of these on top, but that means his Delver will not be flipping.
Yep, and fighting over Living End is going to be more important than clocking your opponent. A 7-turn clock is meaningless in this matchup.
He does keep one of the lands on top, serves Sir 1 with the Delver of Secrets, and passes. You mentioned that this Living End deck going to be cycling creatures on the early turns, but later on the fight will be over the card Living End. 3 copies in David's deck that he will attempt to cascade into.
An interesting element of this deck, this matchup, that we're probably not going to see come into play here is the 4 Thought Scourers in the Grixis Delver deck. Sometimes you can randomly Thought Scour a Tassiger or a Gurmag Angler into your graveyard against a Living End player. That can make their early Living End pretty awkward.
End step, David will cycle Deadshot Minotaur. That's actually really interesting. So if Kevin gets a large enough graveyard, maybe he can discourage Pierce from playing a Living End? Yeah,
there's a lot of variance involved. There's not a ton of creatures in the deck, but it's something that can come up. In particular, if you have an early clock and they have a graveyard with like 3 creatures and you have a 4/5 and they have to bash with a Monstrous Carabid and you just get to eat it with a Delve creature, it can be really awkward.
We look at David Pierce's hand. He plays a Bloodstained Iron, passes. He has 2 copies of Violent Outburst. He has 1 of his 3 Living Ends in hand. Also has Simian Spirit Guide. Kevin on end step will Lightning Bolt at David. Puts him down to 15.
Yeah, that's not going anywhere else in this matchup, so may as well just use it when he has the mana.
Draws the Steam Vents. David goes down to 14. It's the second top 8 and has many modern opens here for Grixis Delver. You top 8'd actually in Indianapolis about a month ago with the deck.
Yeah, I think that the deck is actually just very good in Modern. This way to build it, where you have the more controlling elements, a little heavier than lands and lists people have played previously. Not capitalizing on the aggression of Delver, but capitalizing on the interactive spells of the Grixis card pool.
So Kevin plays the 3rd land. He shocks for it and then just passes. David goes down to 13. And one of the things, now correct me if I'm wrong here, when the way Kevin plays this and the way that you tell me that you play it as well is that it's not so much of a traditional Delver deck where it's very aggressive and tempo-oriented. This is much more of a control deck.
Yeah, and specifically with that Serum Visions earlier in the game, Kevin leads a land on top. He has a Mana Leak and a Snapcaster Mage in hand. He really wants to get to 4 lands so that he can counter the first Living End coming off of a Cascade spell and have Snapcaster Mana Leak for the 2nd copy. Or even a 3 mana on turn 3 from David. A Fulminator Mage is a good target for the first Mana Leak. Then you want to for sure have the Snapcaster Mage because you can fully expect a Living End to be coming after that.
Another cycle from Pierce. It's Architects of Will. He'll cycle Monstrous Carabid. This is all on end step. Then he'll untap. Now the danger from Kevin's side is that David has 2 copies of Violent Outburst. So these will cascade into Living End, but more importantly, they're both instants.
Right, so Kevin has the Snapcaster Mage in hand, a Lightning Bolt in his graveyard. In some matchups, you would just want to get aggressive with that. In this matchup, very high-risk play.
So if Kevin end steps Snapcaster Bolts, he's going to get Living Ended.
Yes.
Well, David shocked for Overgrown Tomb to go down to 11, then passed the turn. That should be a concern already. Kevin will Thought Scour himself. He mills a Remand and a Kolaghan's Command before he draws a card.
Flipping Delver to Remand on this turn would have been great. Unfortunately, he kind of randomly got shafted here.
Yeah. Delver will still not flip. His draw for the turn was a 2nd copy of Snapcaster Mage.
And given that he did flip the Remand, that Snapcaster is going to come into play here. That's actually a very good draw, even though the Delver didn't flip. And Pierce's life total is pretty low already.
Yeah. Delver of Secrets. Just Delver of Secrets, not Insectile Aberration. Delver will go ahead and attack David down to 10.
A little Coral Merfolk action here.
Violent Outburst into cascades into Living End here for Pierce. This is on Kevin's end step, so Pierce has actually already taken the damage and gone down to 10.
Yeah, Kevin's checking out the graveyard, wants to see exactly what kind of damage could be done if this was resolved. There's no way you don't fight over this.
Yeah, it's 2 Carabids and an Architects of Will, so we have 11 power in the graveyard. No creatures in Kevin's graveyard. Like you mentioned, the Thought Scour not, say, hitting a Tasigur. So Kevin will have to fight.
And Kevin's kind of in trouble because he has Mana Leak double Snapcaster. He doesn't have a second 2-mana counterspell. So if David just untaps and goes for a Cascade spell on his turn, that could swing this game heavily in his favor.
Yeah, we mentioned that about those instant speed cards. So now David, it was Mana Leaked, untaps, and now he can try for it again. See him shuffling that Violent Outburst to the front. He's going to pass, actually.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's big if you're... Well, we'll see what Kevin wants to do. He's going to Lightning Bolt at David. And now David's going to Violent Outburst again.
That's so pain. Kevin, he just gave you the game. You gave it right back.
So you're saying if Kevin had left up 2 mana, David would have respected?
Yeah, if he's passing the turn there, you just get to untap and have Snapcaster Mage.
Now, had Kevin main phase this Violent Outburst, or David, Kevin wouldn't have had the counterspell. This would have worked. So David making a slight misstep and Kevin capitalizing, not failing to capitalize.
Exactly.
Now, this Lightning Bolt, though, is going to put David at 7. Can Kevin still just use Snapcasters and Lightning Bolts to seal it up anyway?
He does have Snapcaster Mage. It's a question of exactly how much power is coming into play for Pierce. If Kevin can, say, like, use Terminate to slow that down, but he needs to draw something. He has to draw into more Lightning Bolts and Snapcaster Mages.
Well, Living End is now cascaded into by Pierce, and that one's going to work. So the Delver will hit the graveyard. David will get 11 power worth of creatures. This is all happening on Pierce's end step right now. So Kevin will be ready to untap. He does have 2 Snapcasters in hand. So this is with Living End on the stack. David's responding to his own spell. Kevin says he's going to shuffle the cards that were exiled during the cascade. Kevin's going to shuffle them before putting them back on the bottom. So a Living End's in David's graveyard. That one was Mana Leaked. A Living End is on the stack. The last Living End is in David's hand. So it's important to note that he cannot cascade into any more Living Ends this game.
Though it doesn't look like he'll need to be.
Yeah, I see he pitches Simian Spirit Guide to cycle a Deadshot Minotaur. Let's get not just 11 power. We'll put more into play for Pierce.
Kevin would love it if Pierce were to do something like cycle a Street Wraith here, but it doesn't look like that's going to be happening.
Yeah, 2 life?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's a Deadshot Minotaur, a Monstrous Carabid, another Minotaur, and an Architects of Will. 14 power for David. He will get to look at the top 3 cards of Kevin's deck. But Kevin has a Scalding Tarn in play, so he probably just cracks a fetch here.
Right.
Terminate 2 lands. David gives Kevin the fetch lands. Yeah, see him burying that Terminate.
Yeah, and Kevin's on a 2-turn clock here.
This Bolt is still in the stacks. When it resolves, David will go to 7. I mean, Kevin has to wish it was 6. You see he has 2 Snapcasters in hand.
Right. You know, if David just attacks with all these creatures, though, the Snapcaster can just connect in combat. Maybe Kevin could steal this one back.
Yeah, Kevin will fetch. Going to shuffle away. Now, one thing, when you do this, do you go ahead and look at the top 3 cards?
Yeah.
You want to see, just understand why David made the decision he did?
It's unlikely that you'll get a ton of information. You know, they'll put the bad card on top, but maybe there's something that they're scared of that you don't realize. You'll get some insight and maybe of how many creatures he's going to attack with, if he's giving you, say, a Terminate or dodging giving you a Terminate. Of course, with the cards that Kevin had on top of his deck, you know, 2 lands, that one's pretty obvious, but you still take a look.
So, okay, if we were looking for 7 points of burn, Kevin could play a land, Snapcaster, flashing back Kolagon's command. He could... Well, first one could get Bolt, the second one could get Command. He could shock David, buy back a Snapcaster, and then snap Bolt the last one. I don't know if he can survive long enough to do this, but what I'm saying is the points of burn are there.
This was a really good draw step, actually.
Wow. Yeah, Tasigur the Golden Fang is the draw from Kevin.
And we know that the Monstrous Carabid at least has to attack on the following
Actually,
turn.
this is a huge draw. Hold on. It's a 4/5. It costs 1 mana. Kevin can still cast Snapcaster Lightning Bolt. This was perfect. Wow. All right. So David's at 7 from that Lightning Bolt. Kevin, a 1 mana 4/5. Now we go over to Pierce. Draws a forest for the turn. Now there's a lot of cards still in Pierce's hand. Kevin has to be careful. A swing with the team for Pierce. The Carabid has to attack. Everything else joins in. Here's Snapcaster Mage. It's going to target Lightning Bolt. Now we'll see whether Kevin goes at Architects of Will or goes at David with the Bolt.
Well, with this block lining up, he's definitely thinking about just going at David. And if he goes at David, David would go down to 4, and then the Tastiger is just a lethal attacker. I like any of the blocks except blocking Monstrous Carabid, because that will always have to attack in case you have to block again next turn with the Tastiger.
Also, if David has Violent Outburst as a combat trick, you could lose your Tastiger blocking the Carabid.
Right.
Let's see where Kevin goes with this.
I'm a little confused about casting the Snapcaster Mage in combat here. If he's going to chump block, you gain a little bit of life on that. Maybe force Pierce to go for another living end, at which point you would have Delver and he wouldn't have much going on.
All right, so Tassiger is going to go in front of Deadshot Minotaur. That's a great play, so David won't be able to remove the Tassiger with the Violent Outburst. It looks like 4, 7, 10 damage hits in. So both players now at 7. Lightning Bolt still has Flashback. And David, for 5 mana, he will hard cast Street Wraith. Kevin knows he has it. Lightning Bolt will go at David. That'll put him to 4.
Yep, now either creature plus Snapcaster Bolt. That'll close this game.
Let's see if Kevin can go through it. Here's Snapcaster Mage targeting Lightning Bolt. Yeah, send the Bolt upstairs. David's at 1. Here's 2 attackers. Swing it in. Then the game 1 goes over to Kevin Jones with Grixis Delver.
Wow, that Tassiger off the top was huge.
Yeah, without that, I don't know.
Yeah, Pierce declined to cast the Cascade spell into Mana Leak mana. Kevin tapped out of it. Pierce went for it, and then that Tassiger was just enough off of the top.
So Kevin Jones up 1-0. We're going to go ahead and look at the sideboards for each player. So we'll start over on David Pierce's side. When you're playing a deck like Living End, you wish to get game 1. This is going to be difficult for him now.
Yeah, that just becomes harder when there's open information, when your opponent's game 1 plan has any game against Living End. Not a lot of decks in Modern, you do capitalize against some matchups where you're just going to get them no matter what, but the Grixis Delver is one of those matchups that can steal game 1 a healthy percentage of the time, so pretty unfortunate for Pierce to be losing the first game in the quarterfinals here.
All right, so looking at David Pierce's sideboard, he has a playset of Brindleboars, 3 Shriekmaws, 3 Ingot Chewers, 3 Ricochet Traps, and 2 Anger of the Gods. You had mentioned Ricochet Trap in this matchup. I assume he's going to want that card as he's playing against a blue deck.
So Ricochet Trap here is excellent, and I think every other card in his sideboard is a trap. So there's an option for Shriekmaw. Shriekmaw can catch Delver and stop you from getting clocked that way, but it doesn't kill any of the Delve creatures. So it's okay, but it's not necessarily better than your other options. Like, what are you really taking out at that point? I like the Fulminator Mage plan. I like Beast Within to compound that. There's not a ton that I want to sideboard out. Mostly I just want Ricochet Trap to make sure I can actually resolve my spells.
Yeah, I mean, the counter spells can be so devastating against Living End, especially a card like Remand.
And I'm actually pretty happy if my opponent's bringing in Anger of the Gods in this matchup, because I know as the Delver player, I don't have to commit into Anger of the Gods. Kevin knows that you have it. He's already playing around getting Living Ended and swept that way. He's not going to just sit there and jam a bunch of Delvers if he can't fight over a sweeper like that.
All right, players here are getting ready for Game 2. Now, if you're joining us, we're right now halfway through Season 2 here on the SCG Tour. It's our 6th Open of the season as we make our way into Dallas. Now, we still have more Opens. We started this season back in Columbus. That was the Columbus Invitational weekend. We had Modern tournaments in Milwaukee and Indianapolis. Indianapolis, of course, Metagame Guru is closing out that finals there. Both those players making repeat top 8 performances, as it was Pete Ingram edging out Andrew Jessup. We then had a couple of Standard Opens, both of them won by Tom Ross. That was Atlanta and Orlando, as you see us right now in our Dallas Open weekend. But there's still another half of the season to come. And if you want to come join us on the tour, you should make your way out to one of them. So coming up in a couple weeks here, we have the Legacy Open of the season. That's going to be in Worcester, July 9th through 10th. That's in the Massachusetts area. You're going to definitely want to make it out there. We have lots of great, if you like Delver decks especially, those things, you're going to want to make it out to there.
Big fan.
Standard Open in Columbus happens 2 weeks after that. Then we go to Baltimore for more Standard. We have the regional championships that we had mentioned on August 6th. Then we finish it out with a Modern Open in Syracuse. And finally, August 19th through 21st, that's the Season 2 Invitational Weekend, a split format 3-day event of Modern and Standard, all happening here on the SCG Tour.
A lot of great stops. Hope to see you all out there.
Now, Kevin Jones is up a game right now in this match over his living end opponent of David Pierce. David getting into the top 8 there. See the players are checking out each other's sideboards. You do get deck lists in a top 8, and Kevin's going to use that to his advantage completely as he decides the changes he wants to make to his own sideboard. Let's get a chance actually to look at that. I know that you sideboard this deck a lot. We're going to look at the cards Kevin has in his sideboard. So I know he wants, I'm going to do the easy one here. He has two counter squalls in his sideboard. That seems great. It counters living end. I can't imagine he leaves those. But the interesting things are you start to talk about things, ancestral visions in his sideboard. We'll get to that in a second. So for Kevin Jones of Team Metagame Gurus, the 28-year-old from Kingston, New York, he has 2 Players' Championship appearances, 8 open top 8s, 1 open win. Was a collegiate tennis player over at Pace University, actually walked on and then played at the college level. That is such a Kevin Jones thing to be doing, and it's actually just very impressive on top of that.
I could just imagine exactly this happening in my mind. Kevin just walking up and saying, "Hey, you guys playing tennis?"
And then he just starts winning, and you're just like, what? Everyone's like, this can't be real. Is this happening? It's like, oh, sweet, hey guys, I made the team.
You got an extra racket?
I remember that when I played tennis. I was a varsity player in high school. I remember my senior year, kind of the star of the basketball team had never played tennis, and when basketball season was over, he just walked on for tryouts. And he's like, by the end of the season, I think he was like the second best player on our team. It was something really unfair.
Doesn't that just make you feel terrible as like an established member of the team?
Yeah, it was my 4th year on the team, and I was like, man, people who are natural athletes, what is that? I mean, I wasn't bad, but that was just I could just see Kevin doing that. And just, man, great guy, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Up a game right now.
He's one of those guys that no matter what his record is in the tournament, he just likes playing Magic. He loves it. He's always having fun. You say, "Hey, how's your tournament going, Kevin?" I'm having a good time.
Yeah.
He'll tell you his record after he tells you that he's having fun.
That is great and something I wish more Magic players did.
For sure.
All right, so going back to the sideboard here. 2 counter squalls, those are great. What else here? So I'm still intrigued by the 4 Ancestral Vision. I know you're not on that plan right now.
So this matchup is actually more about what's coming out than what's coming in. Kevin has some pretty bad cards in his main deck. He has 3 copies of Spell Snare, non-starter, completely worthless. Doesn't do anything. There's not even Force of Will to pitch it to in this format.
Yeah, I mean, by design, there are no cards that cost 2 in the entire list of Living End.
Yep, and 4 copies of Terminate, which is more like playing as if you've already lost. It's the kind of card Living End has to have already resolved for Terminate to do anything, and you're just kind of clawing back with it. You want to trim as many of those as possible.
So, all right, that means if we have some really bad cards, it means any card with even marginal value is worth talking about here. So, so what are the bad cards that we're boarding in this matchup?
So the questionable card that we're bringing in is Dispel. You fight over Ricochet Trap with Dispel. That is the reality of bringing this card in this matchup.
I can counter Ricochet Trap.
You can counter Beast Within.
I can counter Beast Within. That one's good.
Yes.
I can counter Violent Outburst. But not the Living End that it finds.
I would not recommend that. That's very unlikely that that's going to be your Dispel target. And then you probably just bring in Ancestral Vision because it's the most serviceable card out of this other nonsense.
So in a game, I guess, where David, let's say things have gone poorly, and David gets to resolve Living End, right?
Yeah.
Do we want to have an Ancestral Visions on 2 or on 1 sitting around, or would we rather have a Terminate in our hand?
It depends how many creatures are coming in. I assume it's enough for me to be in bad enough shape where I would hope to just have Vision to try to draw Lightning Bolts and end the game that way.
So, all right. So rather than trying to kill all the creatures David made, you're saying, oh, these creatures, bad news, time to go upstairs and cross my fingers?
So do you know what happens if you kill all the creatures after the Living End? They Living End again. So let's not fight that battle.
But then yours come back, right? All 2 of them.
Oh, yeah. You get back your Delver and your Snapcaster Mage, but you're tapped out because you just lost a counter war and you don't get to flash anything back, and then you die, and you die, and you die.
Updates from across the field. In the 2v7, that's our backup feature match. Peter Ingram, a 2-0 winner in the Jeskai Mirror over Jim Davis. So for Ingram, he's looking to go back-to-back in Modern Opens. He's one win closer. Now in the semifinals, he will be facing the winner of this match.
All right.
Other results. Andrew Jessup down a game to Jacob Baugh. So Baugh with Obzon Company looking to make it in the top 4. Eliminate one of those metagame guru players.
Yeah, with Baugh taking the first game in that matchup, I really like his odds in the match.
He's trying to deny the Jessup v. Ingram rematch. Same format, same decks.
Oh, yeah.
Last one, Drew Iafredi versus Jared Tao. They are going to game 3. That is the last quarterfinal match we have. That's a Zoo versus Jund matchup.
What was the result on that one? Who took the?
They are going to 3.
Okay.
We don't know yet. But we'll keep you guys informed. After the conclusion of this match, we will get as much of the games of these matches as we can. So we're underway. Game 2, Pierce versus Jones. Pierce starts out on Copperline Gorge. For Jones, it's Dark Slick Shores. A monstrous Carabit is cycled as Pierce starts his second turn. Another match, Jared Tao denying Drew Iafredi. So Tao on Jund making the semifinals. For Iafredi, it is his third open top 8 here in Dallas, but still looking for that win. He'll have to try again.
Back in our match, it looks like Jones just thought scoured away a Terminate. I'm curious how many copies of that card are still in the deck.
Do you think it's possible that you'd said that you'd rather have Visions than Terminate? Kevin might have decided that the other way around?
Yeah, that could be the exact swap.
All right, so 2 Carabids in the graveyard for Pierce.
As long as he has boarded out the spell snares, he hasn't done anything egregiously wrong.
Yeah, I think we can figure out that spell snare is bad here. We counter Shriekmaw, right? That's how that works? He paid 2.
Yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it?
So Pierce continues to stock up the graveyard. On end step, he cycles an Architects of Will. So 3 creatures as Pierce starts his third turn. For Kevin, a Delver of Secrets is in play. And Pierce will go for Fulminator Mage while Kevin has Counter Magic down. Yeah, Kevin, that's going to resolve, and Dark Slick Shores is knocked out by the 2/2.
And I haven't got a peek of a counterspell in Kevin's hand just yet. It's possible that Fulminator Mage is actually best case scenario for Kevin. Pretty happy to come out of this without getting Livin' Ended on this turn.
Kevin has a pair of Lightning Bolts and a Gurmag Angler in hand, so maybe an aggressive take here on the game. Also has another Terminate in his hand, so I think it seems like he's kept, it's 3 Terminates in the main, at least 2 of them are there.
It's pretty early to call it, but I'm really liking David Pierce in this game.
Kevin will fetch out a Watery Grave. He could have gotten, if he wanted to get a red source there, he could have started Lightning Bolting Pierce. He instead is going to make it so he can cast both his counterspells and his Gurmag Angler at some point. Upkeep. He tries for Delver of Secrets. There goes the flip. Thought Scour's on top of the deck, and unlike last game, Kevin gets himself a 3/2 flyer.
Yeah, he would definitely prefer to draw any of his 2-mana counterspells over a Thought Scour, but flipping the Delver is something.
Pierce will go down to 16.
Okay, and it looks like there is a Remand in Kevin's hand, so this is actually a reasonable position.
Now, Remand is actually the counterspell of choice here, isn't it?
Against Living End specifically, yes. A second Fulminator Mage would be pretty backbreaking.
Steam Vents is found by Kevin. He goes ahead and fetches into a shock here. Now, that's heads up. He wants to get that fetch land while David's tapped out because David can make Living End at instant speed.
Yep. He has no third land, I believe, so he wants to make sure that he's able to get that into play.
So we go back to Pierce. At 16 life points, he goes to turn 4. Bloodstained Mire is the play, fetches down to 15. Things like fetching that land main phase seems insignificant, but I can't tell you how many games of Modern I see lost on plays like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of small sequencing things that are going to have huge impacts in this format.
So our third quarterfinal has concluded in this one. A comeback win that keeps the repeat finals alive. Andrew Jessup of Metagame Gurus, 2-1, takes both post-board games to defeat Jacob Baugh and move to the semifinals.
Jeez, what did he turn to him twice?
Wow, Simeon Spear Guide cast here by Pierce after he cycles Architects of Will.
Woof. That is not the most exciting play out of the Living End deck.
Kevin Thought Scours himself puts 2 creatures into the yard, Delver of Secrets and Snapcaster Mage. Enough of that, and he'll give David some pause about casting Living End. Lightning Bolt goes upstairs, sending Pierce down to 12.
Pierce still has a significantly better graveyard.
Well, if he gets Pierce low enough, right?
You're not wrong that there is a threshold, but we're just not close to there.
Wait, we are close, hold on. Kevin attacks Pierce down to 9. He Lightning Bolts Pierce down to 6. If Pierce casts Living End, then Snapcaster comes back, giving that other bolt flashback. Now we're talking about down to 3. Are we really that far off?
No, it really depends on exactly how the turn where the Living End resolve goes.
Okay. Insectile Aberration hits David Pierce down to 9.
And Kevin, no third land. He has a lot of spells he would love to play and leave up remand. No option to do that. The only line where he could maybe see him casting a spell this turn is to Serum Visions and try to find a land. It's so greedy. Pierce is down to 9. He has Insectile Aberration in play. He has avenues to burn Pierce out of the game. I think you just have to pass here.
That's what he'll do. No land for Kevin. 5th land for Pierce, swings with Simian Spirit Guide. Kevin Jones down to 14. This race, though, not in Pierce's favor. He's going to have to take an action.
Oh, yeah, far from it.
Now, I got to tell you something. 2 copies of Living End in David Pierce's hand.
Ugh.
If he draws the 3rd, his deck stops working.
Huge draw for Jones. Picks up Basic Island.
Great. Can't be fulminated. I'm all about this. The Insectile Aberration hits Pierce down to 6, and now we are in territory with, because of these lightning bolts, I'm not sure that Pierce can Living End anymore.
Yeah, well, now Jones has the option to just leave up Lightning Bolt Pierce on Pierce's end step and remand for a spell.
Things are very difficult for the Living End player.
Jones,
Draw not coming together.
I think it's also reasonable to cast Serum Visions now on this window, but I think that I'd be inclined to pass in this stage.
We can pass. Now, the one thing that Pierce has going for him is he does have that copy of Ricochet Trap still in hand. Now, it traps for 1 red, and you can trap it when your opponent casts a blue spell. However, you can still pay it for 4, and Pierce has the mana to do just that. He'll attack a Seaman Spirit Guide, put Kevin down to 12, and this is the gross play. Suspends Living End on 3.
And, now Pierce just has 1 land up. Kevin Jones has Lightning Bolt. He has remand. I believe he's just locked this one up.
All right, so Pierce plays land 6, passes the turn. Kevin seeing 1 Copperline Gorge up. He's saying,
"Get him!
Go for the lightning bolt!
Get him! Bolt his face!"
Just making sure he knows he has it. He's asking for.
Can he ricochet trap Lightning Bolt? That's the question. I love double checking this.
Kevin, Oracle checking for and Ricochet. He lightning bolts Pierce down to 3. And Ricochet Trap, Living End, nothing in Pierce's hand. It didn't work out. And in 2 games, Kevin Jones defeats David Pierce and moves on to the semifinals.
Awesome. Love it. Grixis Delver, Kevin Jones, let's do it.